Hello, dear students. This is Vijay Kumar M. Boratti, Associate Professor in the English Department of University Evening College, University of Mysore. Today, I am going to give an introductory lecture on postcolonial criticism. This is a part of literary theory which is prescribed for the 6th semester BA students of University of Mysore. I hope this small and brief lecture will be useful to the students. Before I begin the lecture, let me say a few words. The following lecture is based on the points primarily taken from Peter Barre's Beginning Theory, an introduction to literary and cultural theory. The presenter of the lecture does not claim an exhaustive or authoritative account of postcolonial criticism. The presenter also expects the readers and viewers to refer other books on the topic for more knowledge and information. Now, let me explain what do we mean by postcolonial criticism. Postcolonial criticism is a critical tool, and this critical tool is important for us to understand and analyze literature, arts, culture, history of ex-colonial countries. What do you mean by ex-colonial countries? Ex-colonial countries are those countries which gained freedom from colonialism mostly in the second half of the 20th century. Postcolonial criticism emerged as a very distinct category in 1990s. The most influential critical works that shaped and resulted in postcolonial criticism and theories are Orientalism, written by Edward Said in 1978. In other words, written by Gayatri Spivak in 1987. The Empire Writes Back, written by Bill Ashcroft in 1989, and Nation and Narration, authored by Homi Bhabha, published in 1990. In fact, many creative writings such as novels, short stories, and poems written after the end of colonialism worldwide have post-colonial characteristics. Now, let us know the salient features of post-colonial criticism. First of all, post-colonial criticism is interested in disregarding universal claims of literature of European values. What do we mean by universal or universalism? Universal is understood to be an idea which is one and the same everywhere and it is relevant in all places. This kind of European claim of universalism is not taken seriously by post-colonial criticism. Insignificant place is given to such European ideas of timelessness and universal nature of literature or literary values. On the other, emphasis is given to specific and particular experiences and viewpoints of ex-colonial countries. These experiences are cultural, social, regional, and national of different countries or races belonging to ex-colonial countries. Another important feature of post-colonial criticism is rejection of universal standard set forth by colonialism in order to judge what is literature, what standard to be adopted to judge literature, etc. Such judgmental criteria of European standard is questioned and rejected. Let us examine this rejection of European standards of judging literature with an example. There are many critics who consider Thomas Hardy's Wessex novels as having universal aspects of human condition, and his novels are not regional, or his novels are not labor class novels. This is the standard notion of Thomas Hardy's novels. Colonialism of the European style, especially British colonialism and British literary standards, expect other literatures or literary values to conform to its ideas or ideals. If other literatures or literary values do not conform to the Eurocentric ideas set by the European colonialism, such writings or such literatures are considered unimportant and they are marginalized. But post-colonial criticism exposes such limitations of Eurocentric ideas. It goes further and shows the inability of Eurocentric literary values or literary ideas to empathize with other literatures. It tries to reveal colonial silence on imperialism and racism. That is to say that post-colonial criticism is interested in exposing colonialism's silence on its own imperialist tendencies and racist approaches. On the other hand, post-colonial criticism is interested in highlighting cultural differences and diversities in their worldviews. In fact, post-colonial criticism celebrates hybridity. That is to say, plurality is highlighted, promoted, and celebrated as a source of energy, and it is also seen as having potentiality to change literary norms set by the European colonial masters. Post-colonial critics have written voluminously about post-colonial creative writers. According to the post-colonial critics, the creative writers of the ex-colonial countries have created a pre-colonial past of their nation. This is done as one way of rejecting modern and contemporary, as it is tainted with colonial status or colonial memories. An awareness of Western ideas of exotic or immoral non-Western cultures or traditions has shaped postcolonial writings. In other words, postcolonial writers express their creativity to question and reject precisely such Western ideas. Their novels or poems are abundant in such rejections or questionings. One of the best examples of such questioning or criticism of the Western or Christian influence is Nigerian novelist Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. This novel was published in 1958 and it expresses or remembers how Igbo tribal communities disintegration happened because of Western colonialism. Peter Barry has observed or pointed out three stages of writing in the context of post-colonial writers. The first stage is called adapt. That is, post-colonial writers have adopted European forms of literature, especially the form of novel, for their writings. The second stage is adapt. That is, post-colonial writers have adapted European forms of literature to express local subject matters. The third stage is called adapt. It means to say the remaking of the European forms to suit the subject matters of the post-colonial writers. Now, let me say a few words about the most important books which influenced post-colonial criticism. The foremost book to influence post-colonial criticism is Frantz Fanon's The Wretched of the Earth. This book was published in 1961 by Fanon. Fanon was a French political philosopher. The Wretched of the Earth is about dehumanizing effects of colonialism upon individuals and nations. It discusses the psychological molding of the natives, that is the colonized people, by the masters, that is the colonizers. The book also discusses ways of decolonizing or coming out of colonial influence by oneself. For this, Fanon emphasizes revolution. That is, revolution is necessary for overthrowing colonialism, according to Fanon. This revolution can be possible by various means. One of them is cultural resistance to colonialism by national culture. Fanon gives more emphasis on national culture or national consciousness. In fact, according to Fanon, revolution and cultural resistance are the first step for decolonizing, and later this revolution and cultural resistance can be a means of finding and airing a voice and identity of oneself. The other way of cultural resistance or revolution is by means of reclaiming the past, which is devalued by Western European colonial forces. This devaluation can be in terms of the concepts such as uncivilized, violent, barbaric, uncultured, etc. These are the terms which are used by the colonial or Western colonial forces to devalue or deride the native cultures or traditions of the ex-colonial countries. Fanon calls for gradual erosion of colonial ideology which derided the non-Western, non-European countries. Here we have the portrait of Frantz Fanon. He was born in 1925 and died very young in 1961. Yet another book which influenced post-colonial criticism is Edward Said's Orientalism. This book was published in 1978. Edward Said was a Palestinian-born American. In the book, Edward Said questions Eurocentric universal claims or universalism. He does not accept colonial superior claims or superior standards set by the colonial masters. One of the superior claims was in the form of Orientalism. Edward Said considers Orientalism as the bedrock of colonialism. It identifies the East as other and inferior to the West. In fact, it symbolizes cruelty, lust, sensuality, instincts, laziness, and so on in the case of the Eastern culture or Eastern traditions. Contradictorily, the East is also fascinating, mystical, and exotic in the eyes of the West. So, according to the Orientalist tendencies of the colonial masters, people in the East are mere masses, they are not individuals. In the book, Edward Said gives a lot of space for criticizing W.B. Yeats' Byzantium poems. He examines Yeats' poems as examples of Orientalism. Here is the portrait of one of the most influential and very important post-colonial critics, Edward Said. He was born in 1935 and died in 2003. Last but not the least, let us now try to understand limitations in the post-colonial criticism. Like any other criticism or critical approach, post-colonial criticism too suffers from certain limitations. The foremost is it gives too much importance to colonialism and its power. In fact, colonialism becomes the central focus in post-colonial critical approach. Peter Barry's theory of post-colonial criticism, especially the way ex-colonial countries adapt, and adapt, is shown only in relation to colonialism, and it is not focused or explained in relation to other factors or aspects which may have influenced the three stages. Postcolonial criticism does not consider the role of native scholars or intellectuals in colonialism and its exercise of power. Postcolonial critical readings, especially in India, confine itself to only colonialism and Orientalism. Perhaps it's time that the postcolonial critics start focusing on the role of native scholars or intellectuals in the making and unmaking of colonialism. This was all about the introductory note on postcolonialism. Thank you, students, for watching and listening to this brief note on the topic. But remember a thing, if possible, get hold of other works on this topic for more knowledge and information. Thank you, one and all, again.